Hi guys, in this video we're going to be learning how to do a realistic wood grain effect using oil paints. Creating wood grain with oils is one of those techniques that looks a lot harder than it actually is. With just a few products and a few simple steps, I'm going to show you how it's done. Firstly, let's take a look at what we'll need. The very first item you'll need is a light tan acrylic or lacquer base coat. I like to use MRP because it's pretty awesome and it's easy to spray. But other brands such as Tamiya, Life Colour, Vallejo, Mission Models will work. As long as you're not using an enamel paint, you'll be fine. A light colour is ideal because it allows the patterns of the wood grain to show up. If you're using a darker colour, it can get lost and we can address the lightness later. And secondly, and probably most importantly, is a good selection of oil paints. Artist quality oil paints are going to give you the best results, but you can use some of the higher end student ones, like Winsor & Newton Winton and Daler & Rowney Georgian. A great selection of paints to get you started are the ones I've shown here: yellow ochre, burnt sienna, burnt umber and French ultramarine. These colours will pretty much cover all of the bases. Next up is a decent quality low odour oil thinner. It's best not to use enamel thinners, as these often contain nasties that can end up stripping off your paintwork. My favourite go-to low odour thinner is VMS Universal Weathering Carrier Light. Another item that is key to getting this technique right is an old tatty brush. You know those ones that sit at the back of the pot with the bristles all splayed? They are perfect for this technique. They can help to give you that irregularity that a nice, tidy new brush won't. To protect your painted wood grain, a varnish is essential. Either an acrylic or a lacquer varnish would be perfect for this. These are the two varnishes I like to use when doing my wood grain: the VMS HD Satin or Matte Varnish, or a Mr. Colour Super Clear Gloss. The last item on my list is optional, and those are the Tamiya Clear colours. With these you can imitate a varnish or a stain and change the final colour of your wood grain. And that's it for the materials we'll need. Now it's time to see how it's done. First up, I've got some panels that have been primed with Mr. Surfacer 1000 and painted with some light MRP colours. With our oil colours on the palette, let's start mixing up a suitable wood colour. Here I'm using a mix of burnt umber and burnt sienna to make a rich, deep wooden colour. I'm going to add a touch of low odour thinner just to help the paint to flow better. You don't want this mix to be too thin. It's not going to be a wash, it's going to be applied like a paint. Next up, you want to paint this mixture directly in the area where you want your wood grain to go. I'm going to paint on 4 different shades of brown, all mixed up from our 4 oil colours. This step doesn't have to be neat, you'll be removing most of the paint anyway, and if you've got anywhere where you don't want it, you can just use a brush slightly wet with thinner and wipe away the excess oil. And with our faux wooden panel coated in oil paint, it's time to set it aside for 10 minutes just to let the thinner evaporate. Okay, it's time to start removing some oil paint. With your splayed tatty brush, you want to start brushing the oil paint in the direction you want the wood grain to go. This is our first stage of paint removal, so it doesn't have to be perfect. The great thing about oil paints is you can keep working it until you're happy. A good tip is to wipe your brush off between each removal, because you want to be removing paint and not just smearing it around. Once you've got the basic sketch of the direction of the wood grain, you can start adding slight wiggles and undulations with the paintbrush. This will add to the natural and random look of the wood grain, making it look more realistic. One tip I've got when doing this step is to have a look at some references. Some woods have tighter grain than others, and some woods have a lot more movement in them. So it's a good idea to look up what kind of wood you want to replicate and following that as a rough guide. Now, this is already looking quite realistic, but there are a few extra things we can do to make it even better. Now we're going to push the oil paint around even more to add some more grain and variation. If you look at wood in real life or a photo, you'll notice lots of different patterns and different distances between the wood grains. And it's quite simple to achieve by using your brush as a tool to push the paint around and into the shapes you want it. The harder you push with your brush, the more paint you're going to move. And if you think it looks too extreme or too stark, or you just don't like it, you can blend it back in with soft strokes. If you lightly moisten your brush with thinner, you can remove even more paint. Just remember to blend the area back in with a dry brush for a smooth transition. You can also add small dots of dark brown oil paint to simulate knots. Once you're happy with the result, you're going to need to protect that work you've put in. You've got two options here. You can set it aside underneath a Tupperware container to protect it from dust, or you can varnish it straight away. I always choose the latter, and it's actually a fairly safe option. But because oil paint does take a day or two to dry, and much longer to fully cure, it will still be slightly delicate, even under that layer of varnish. So be careful when handling it. And this is the result of the wood grain under varnish. I think it looks really good. But it is tricky painting fiddly things with a camera in the way. So I did paint these extra panels, just in case the other ones didn't go very well. Let's move on to the last part of the tutorial, tinting. Wood is quite often covered with a protective varnish, and these often have a slight colour shift to them. So I mixed up 4 lots of Tamiya clear colours. From left to right, yellow, orange, red, and I made a brown with orange, red and blue. These were all thinned with Mr. Leveling thinners, at a ratio of 3 parts thinner to 1 part paint. These can really affect how your final wood grain looks, and are best built up in light, misty layers. I'm going a bit heavier with these examples so you can see the effect clearly. And if the wood grain you're trying to replicate is covered with a gloss varnish, you can combine both the tint and the varnish in this step. Just add some gloss varnish to the mix and you'll have a nice, shiny piece of finished wood. The eagle-eyed of you might have noticed that the blue I'm using isn't a clear one, but because I only used a small amount, it didn't affect the opacity enough to make a difference. And that's my tinting stage complete. So, from top to bottom, we've got yellow, orange, red, brown, and natural. My masking could have been tidier, but it gives you an idea of what tints can do to the final result. And that's it. That's my guide to creating a realistic wood grain effect using oil paints, and a few other bits. I hope you enjoyed it and found it useful. If you liked it, give me a thumbs up and let me know in the comments. If you didn't like it, give me a thumbs down and tell me why you didn't like it. And also, if you haven't subscribed already, please do, it really helps the channel. I'd also like to give a massive thanks to my patrons for supporting the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated, thank you so much guys. And if you'd like to support the channel and get access to behind the scenes content and this awesome 8-page companion guide to this tutorial, head over to www.patreon.com/LPJModels. I'm James from LPJ Models. Thanks for watching.